Welcome to What is Going for new thought from the edge of Each week on OMTimes flagship radio show, veteran broadcaster, author, and media consultant Sandie Sedgbeer conducts thought-provoking interviews with inspirational authors, artists, musicians, scientists, speakers, and filmmakers who are working at the point where spirituality and science meet consciousness at the very edge of Here is your host, Sandie Sedgbeer.
Hello. Anxiety, depression, and substance abuse issues have soared dramatically with the advent of COVID-19, and those with alcohol and drug addictions have been especially impacted. Anxiety has become its own pandemic these past 3 years, affecting people in many insidious ways, from overeating and mindless scrolling to excessive online spending, and even cryptocurrency addiction, which is a new twist on the old problem of gambling. Well, with me today to share a powerful, holistic pathway to moving beyond the constraints of addictions and negative habits is teacher, author, Qigong expert, meditation and recovery expert as well, Stephen Washington, whose book, Recovering You, Soul Care and Mindful Movement for Overcoming Addiction, offers a really practical lifeline to anyone, addicted or not, who feels they've become disconnected from their best self. Stephen Washington, welcome.
Thank you so much, Sandie. Lovely to be here. Great to see you again.
You too. Stephen, long before you became a renowned Qigong meditation and recovery teacher and speaker, you had a long career as a contemporary dancer, performing on Broadway and in touring productions of Disney's The Lion King. But despite your success, you weren't happy. In fact, your entire life was a bit of a mess at that time, and you had a drink and drugs habit right up to the age of 29. Do you know what were the underlying issues that fueled your destructive behavior?
Oh, very good question. Thank you, Sandie, for asking it. Well, I think addiction is a very complicated thing, right? There are many layers, it's multifaceted. And I think for me, what contributed to my struggles with alcohol and drugs and addiction in general was a combination of undealt with trauma. Also, in my family, there's a long line of alcoholism and drug addiction. And also, I think for me, just being a very sensitive person, and the world quite easily overwhelmed me. And I turned to substances as a way to self-soothe and to self-regulate. I didn't know that that was what I was doing at the time, but when I look back at it all, it's very clear to me. And it worked for me for a very long time until it didn't work anymore.
So was there a particular final straw moment or experience that made you determined to quit?
I feel as though when I look back at the last day that I drank a little over 20 years ago, it was like any other day. I think the night before I'd been partying, I'd been clubbing. I may have even, I'm sure I did some drugs as well. I may have even, I'm trying to think of my words very carefully here. I may have even brought someone home that I didn't know very well. So really demoralizing and demeaning behavior. And when I woke up that next morning and I had gone on a trip to an amusement park with friends, hungover like you wouldn't believe, and I normally would have had a therapy appointment with my therapist and their telephone appointments. And I decided to keep my appointment even though I was going to a theme park, which in and of itself is insanity. And it was during my call with my therapist that I had a flash of, okay, something's wrong here. Something's not right. And he, without directly stating the obvious, his reaction to my behavior was a wonderful illustration for me that, okay, time is up. These thoughts that you've had before for years now that you may have a problem with alcohol and drugs, here we are again.
Yeah.
What are you going to do about it this time? So what I did was I called my friend Craig later that day, and I can't remember if I saw him that day or if I saw him the next day. He's a friend who was in recovery. I knew he would know what to say to me. He would offer me some comfort and perhaps a solution. And from there, I took my first steps into recovery.
You talked about being highly sensitive, and we are hearing more and more these days about highly sensitive people, intuitive people, empathic people who find it very hard to cope with the energies of this world. And it's becoming okay to talk about these things now. But I'm sure, 20 years ago, we didn't hear about highly sensitive people at all. I think we're all highly sensitive to a degree, but watching all of the statistics, all of them, anxiety, depression, drug abuse, drinking, soar as the world is going through this tremendous upheaval, brings this, it really does highlight that we need help, we need strategies, we need tools. And you found your tools through the thing that you love doing, which was movement, dancing. So tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I've been dancing since the day I was born, I think. And I think I mentioned this in the book. There's a time when it's etched into my memory so clearly of myself dancing in my living room that I grew up in the apartment I grew up in Connecticut when I was a young child. My parents had split. My mother had a boyfriend at the time. And I remember dancing in the living room to Stevie Wonder or Stephanie Mills, just playing it on the record player and just dancing around the room by myself. No one was there until suddenly he was there, my mother's friend. And I felt very self-conscious and I stopped. And he said, "Oh, no, don't stop. Keep going." And then later on, he said, "Your son," he said this to my mother, "your son has a gift. He has a talent and that should be nurtured." And when I look back at that time, I realized that I was doing my own energy work
Yeah.
on myself at that time because that dancing made me feel good. It transported me. Movement transported me. And then later on in my teens, when I started training as a dancer, it really became a lifeline for me because it was tough being a teenager in Connecticut, studying the arts, being the only boy studying the arts, studying dance. Also having a deeper sense of the way the world views people of color and dealing with racism, not really understanding it, but feeling the effects of it.
Yes.
And as I said before, just being a very sensitive child. And I love the things that Gabor Mate talks about when he refers to sensitivities of addicts and how trauma plays a big part. And when we look at ACEs, people are talking a lot about ACEs and how these adverse childhood experiences, and the list is long. When you look at what the list is in terms of what those experiences could be, and how any of those things on that list could be traumatic, can have a negative impact on a person, and the effects can come down the road much further in life. And addiction is one of those effects, one of those byproducts of that unresolved, untreated trauma. So I found my way to dance, and again, it saved my life. I think as a teenager, if I didn't have it, who knows what I would have done. Eventually, it did. It led me to New York City to become a modern dancer, and then I eventually landed on Broadway doing The Lion King, and it was a wonderful time, and it was an incredibly stressful time as well, and and I fell to my knees because of life, right? And eventually I got sober, and I got sober through 12-step recovery. It helped me tremendously. All the while, movement was a part of my life. But what changed for me was about 10 years, and 10 years into my sobriety, I found Qigong. Qigong made its way into my life when I started to study traditional Chinese medicine at a school in San Jose, California. And during that time, I was struggling in that graduate program. I was struggling so much so that I had almost nonstop anxiety, panic attacks. I thought I was going to relapse. I thought I was going to lose my recovery because I just did not know how to manage what I was feeling. And it was the practice of Qigong, in addition to other suggestions that people in my Chinese medicine program suggested and offered to me, that I suddenly was able to transform those feelings, those very intense, very strong feelings. I was able to transform them so that I was able to understand them better and move through them. And from that moment on, I knew that this was a powerful tool, that it was going to change my recovery. It made me wish that I had learned it 10 years earlier. That's one of the reasons why I wrote this book, because I wanted to share it, and that it could be a tool that people could use no matter where they are in their recovery. But the earlier you can grab hold of these tools, the better. And yeah, Qigong gives me space. It gives me space in my body.
I'm curious about, obviously you expressed an awful lot through dance. And we know that with Chinese medicine, you're working on the energy flowing through the body, etc. And Qigong is, known to, kind of move blockages, release things. How is that doing Qigong movements different from dancing?
I think a lot has to do with intention. What's the intention behind it? For me, that was the difference. I felt as though I could express myself through dance. I could certainly do all the things that help my body to turn on, like the release of certain hormones that feel good in the body, for sure. But there's something about connecting movement with breath and focused intention. I think that is key. That is key. And there's something about the simplicity of Qigong and the repetitive nature of it, that it becomes this mindful movement moment or mindful movement practice.
Yeah.
It becomes quite meditative. I think that is
Yeah.
the key.
I think you can get lost in it. Yeah. So you write in your book that there's a connection between freedom and recovery, and you say that many of us, we feel trapped by the demands of our life, the past, the present. More and more people are feeling trapped by all the things, the control they no longer have over their lives, because there are so many restrictions caused by the pandemic and by all of the side effects of the pandemic. How does freedom and recovery, how do they go hand in hand for you?
When I think of freedom and recovery, I automatically think back to active addiction, where in my experience, in active addiction, my life became very small, very restricted. My life revolved around coming down off of whatever it is that I was putting in my body, or the process of getting ready to do it again, feeling it in my body, and it's just this over and over the cycle. And so that calls the shots, really, and it makes your life very small and very restricted. And recovery to me is the opposite of that. Recovery to me is freedom. It is linked to solutions. It's linked to expansiveness and
Yeah.
community,
Mm.
connection. Because if your life is very small and isolated, there's not much connecting going on.
Yeah.
And science will tell you that one of the ways that we manage our stress better is through connection and community, and not, and to move out of isolation. People need people.
Mm.
And that's a
Yeah.
big part of recovery. That's been a big part of my recovery. And when I look around, people around me that I know in recovery, the people who have had the most success with it have really dove into this aspect of community and connection.
I guess that's why so many people who've gone through 12 steps stay connected to one another, usually, for the rest of their lives.
Indeed. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And in this book, I tried to create a sense of community. I wanted
Mm.
the reader to feel me in a very intimate way, but also to feel my recovery friends that I brought in who shared their experience, strength, and hope as well. And I wanted to create a community that could envelop and wrap around the people who were going to read this book and use it as a
Mm.
tool.
There have been many books written on addiction and recovery. What do you think yours adds, to what's out there? What does yours have that others don't?
Well, it's a very good question. Thank you for asking that. I have to admit, I haven't read every recovery book that's out there, but I've read a few. What I know is that there are very few that offer movement as a tool, particularly Qigong. There's a few that offer yoga, and I think yoga is a wonderful mindful movement practice as well. Uh, One thing that makes my book unique as well is that it's so much of it is my story.
Mm.
Yeah, what it was like, what happened, and what it's like now, and how the tools that I offer that I've gathered over the years have helped me and have helped other people. So that's what makes it very special. And also, I think writing is a very important tool, journal writing. Self inquiry is a very important tool that's helped me in my recovery. And there's a lot of it in the book. It's
Mm.
important that we take time to self reflect and put pen to paper because amazing things happen when we do. It does amazing things for the brain, for the mind. It calms us down and it helps us to gain insight and clarity. And it's a way to look at oneself with compassion. And that's really
Mm.
an important part of the process.
Well, the interesting thing is we can all move. We might not all be able to dance or dance well, but we can all move. And
Yeah.
as you say, movement is so necessary for healing.
Mhm.
Moving energy is so necessary. You make a really good point in the book about recovery. The journey is not just about what we stop doing, but also what we start doing. And I think that's where a lot of people who want to change a habit fall down because they don't plan ahead and think, what am I going to do instead of?
Right.
And you offer so many things for people to do instead of.
Right. Absolutely. It is about what you bring into your life. Once you've removed something, what are you going to do to help fill you up and lift you
Mm.
up? And I
Yeah.
offer quite a few things to help people do that. And as I say in the book, recovering you is just will be just one of hopefully the many tools that the reader will use to help them build a more conscious, joyous, healthier life. And it is important that you add things that are life enhancing instead of things that will take away and drain you of energy.
Mm. I think it's important to point out the book is not just about recovery from addiction. I mean, this is for anybody, isn't it? Anybody who's got habits that they want to leave behind, who feel stuck, who feel less than, who feel shame. I mean, you talk about the, all of the different aspects that come with healing. And, shame is something that every single one of us has experienced. I don't think we leave this planet without experiencing it. And I think for people who've had addiction issues, they have an even bigger load of it. Tell us how you help people get through shame, because it's not easy to change yourself. It's not easy at all to make these kinds of changes.
No, it isn't. First thing I want to circle back to before I get to shame is just to also mention that, yes, this book is for anyone, and everyone could benefit from this book. I think about this book as a tool for people who are getting ready to get ready to enter recovery, who are in recovery for a short period of time or have a long time in recovery. But I also think about this book as being helpful to people who love people who are in recovery.
Yeah.
And we all know someone, or deeply involved with someone, who has issues with recovery, or issues with addiction, I should say. And it's draining for everyone that's involved. And so it's practices that can help ground you and fill you up. And I also feel as though the stories that I share in the book and the tools, I think it gives an insight to the mind and the life of an addict, so that those who don't have addiction issues but know someone who does, this may give them a window to understand them more. And I've seen this firsthand just in my own family, and how certain people in the family who have addiction and those who don't quite understand what it's like for that person to walk. They don't know what it's like to walk in that person's shoes.
Yeah.
And I think a little bit more understanding and compassion goes a long way. But as far as the topic of shame, I think shame is the linchpin in addiction. I think it's that feeling, that idea that there's something inherently wrong, and that there's nothing that we can do about it to change it, that there's something inherently wrong with us, that we are damaged goods or defective. And I know that I felt a great deal of shame and growing up for many different reasons, and I carried that into my later years, and it definitely fueled my addiction, and it just kind of kept this hamster wheel going for me. And I love what Brene Brown says about shame, and that shame needs three things to survive: secrecy, silence, and judgment. And it's been my experience that when I share something that I'm ashamed of, that I feel shame about, it lightens my load. It lifts me up. It becomes this thing that's not something that I have to hide in a dark closet and allow it to fester. Because that's the thing with shame. If we don't share it, if we keep silent about it, if we keep secrets about it, it will fester and it will grow. And it will start coming out in many different ways, destructive ways. And once we share it with someone, and it's not just with anyone, I think we have to be discerning about who we share our shame with, and allow that person in to hear us, and to hear us without judgment. Because if you can share your shame with someone else and they don't judge you, it's an invitation for you to not judge yourself so harshly. And I know that shame is something that, if it's unchecked and unresolved, it's something that can just spiral out of control. And I love what my friend Keith says in the book, how it was really important for him to work with a therapist, a counselor, to help him examine the shame that he was feeling and find some way to resolve it. Otherwise, he was just doomed and destined to keep repeating the same mistakes over and over and over again. So like you said, shame is not unique. It's part of the human experience, but there's something about people with addiction issues that we tend to have a great deal more of it.
Yeah. I mean, we all know that we all have fears. We all know that we have certain other things, But shame is the one that I think everybody feels that they have to keep hidden. There's so many big stories wrapped up in shame, and
Oh,
I think that's one of the hardest things for people to get through.
absolutely. And I also feel as though there's so many other emotions that are woven into the shame
Yeah, yeah,
too. It's so complex, it's so multi-layered and multifaceted.
yeah.
But I wanted to provide people a way to look at shame in a different way and some solutions around it in the book. And I think that I've successfully been able to offer people some things to consider and some
Mm.
tools that they can use to help move them from where they are to a better place around shame.
One of the things I really liked about the book and thought was really neat was that you have, various chapters dealing with certain facets of the recovery journey. And at the end of those chapters, you have illustrations, you have movement, you show people how to do some of the movements. And by the time they get to the end of the book, they've got a whole sequence of movement. So they've got a complete routine that they've gradually gone through and learned in a very easy way. It reminded me of when I first did Tai Chi, and you only get a little bit of the movement. And then, after you've practiced that several times and your body remembers it, you then move on to the next. But that just felt like such a wonderful thing to be giving to your readers, something so tangible and also so, it's such a beneficial thing, not just beneficial emotionally and physically and psychologically, but just the joy, of creating that flowing sequence of movements. You can't help but end it with a smile on your face.
Oh, that's great. Thank you for saying that. I put I wanted Qigong to be, of course, a very big part of the book, and having it at the end of a movement at the end of each chapter, I thought was a really effective way to help people process whatever has come up
Yes.
for them in
Yeah.
reading and doing the work in the chapter. And it makes me think of just that time that I spent in Chinese medicine school when I was going through so much and was feeling such big feelings and did not know how to skillfully manage my emotions. When I started to practice Qigong, it helped me to manage my emotions better and gain insights and listen to my intuition and feel more present in the moment and more accepting of what is in the moment. And it helped me to not look at the past and stare at it and have regret, or not look to the future and stare at it and develop some story or fear around it. So the movement was absolutely the medicine for me. And I wanted to provide people the medicine as well. And I'm so grateful for my friend, Aaron Posanti, who is the illustrator that I used in the book. Aaron and I go back a long way. When I was studying in New York to be a Pilates instructor, we were both working at the same studio and in New York City. And she's evolved away from Pilates and has gone back to school. And she's just an amazing artist. And I saw her work online, and I just thought, wow, look at her, look at Erin. Oh my goodness, this is
Mm.
amazing. And then
Yeah.
when Georgia from New World Library asked me if I wanted to write a book, and I thought that this would be a good topic for the book, I immediately thought of Erin. And I knew that she would add something very special to this because she too was a dancer. She too understands the body and the movement of the body and the spirit that comes out through movement. So I love what she was able to do, and I tried to be as clear as possible through the illustrations, through the written instructions as well, and then also the helpful hints that I have at the end, just for little things for people to think about when they're doing the movement and going on this somatic journey or experience for themselves.
Mm. Well, I love the fact that the illustrations look like you. So we can see that it's you giving
Yeah.
us, that. And the other thing I like about it, is I cannot stand workbooks. I mean, I
Mm.
know they work for many people, but I'm out of there the minute I'm asked to do things. But that is something I can do. That is
Mm,
something I would enjoy doing. And I think, I asked you earlier, what does your book have that others don't? I think right there, you've given people something that immediately, you're not talking at them. They've got something very tangible that they can practice that is going to immediately make a difference in the way they feel. And
right.
and that, I think, is a USP, a really good
Oh,
USP for the book.
oh.
We're going to take a short break now, Stephen. We'll be back in a few minutes, so don't go away.
OMTimes TV. Imagine becoming a super influencer. Reinvent yourself, invest in your brand, and then manifest your success with a robust spheric approach. OMTimes Media and Broadcasting offers a unique and multifaceted way to become the spiritual and conscious influencer you deserve to be by putting your message across our powerful platform with its proven record of integrity and excellence. Through our produced shows, OMTimes offers the opportunity to become a social media TV personality, a radio show host, an OMTimes magazine columnist, and a syndicated podcaster, all in one shot. By live streaming your show on OMTimes TV and broadcasting it across the extensive OMTimes radio and TV networks, you become more than a host. You become an ambassador and a force for positive change. OMTimes. Open yourself to the possibilities.
Hello, I'm Sandie Sedgbeer, host of OMTimes' flagship radio show, What Is Going On? And as an author, editor and 13 times book judge who's read thousands of books and interviewed hundreds of authors, I'm constantly asked what's really worth reading and what's not. So I created the No BS Spiritual Book Club to help you save time and money by picking the brains of discerning names who have walked this path before you. There's no catch, no fees and no BS, just an ever-growing library of 10 best spiritual book lists from some of your favourite authors and teachers, plus free book excerpts, audios and video interviews with people like Don Miguel Ruiz Jr., David G., Lee Harris, Mark Nepo and more. From well-known classics to hidden gems you've never heard of, it's the only no BS guide to the best spiritual books to enlighten your journey of self-discovery. So why not join the club? Get inspired and save money at the nobsspiritualbookclub.com.
There are 16 million children struggling with hunger in America. That's 1 in 5 daughters, sons, neighbors, and classmates who don't know where their next meal is coming from. Yet billions of pounds of good food go to waste every year. It's time we do something about it. Feeding America is a nationwide network of food banks that helps provide meals to millions of kids and families in need. Visit feedingamerica.org to help them feed even more. Together, we can solve hunger. Together, we're feeding America.
Welcome back. Stephen Washington, you've included the words soul care in the subtitle of your book. Tell me what you mean by soul care.
What I mean by soul care is anything that we do that tends to the health of our body, mind, and spirit, I think contributes to the health and the well-being of our soul, basically. And every practice that I put in the book tends to this deep aspect of ourselves, which I think is really related to the essence of who we are. And I think through the experience of addiction, we move away from that really deep self-identifying part of ourselves, and we lose a part of ourselves. So I felt like it was important to create practices that not only tend to the body, but just tend to your emotions and your spirit and just everything, because they're all connected. They can't be separated. And we want each aspect of ourselves to be as healthy and as vibrant and as alive as possible.
What sort of practices do you recommend people engage in, for soul care?
I think it's different things do different things for different people. But for myself, one of the things that helps me tend to my soul is taking time each day to think about what I'm grateful for. That's been a really big part of my soul care, so that I look at life with a sense of optimism rather than pessimism. And I think that tends to be something that, as a person uh, with addiction issues, that tends to be a tricky thing. Uh, I think for me, what I also do is spend time in nature. That helps me to tend to my deep part of myself, my soul, and also just taking time to move my body, like I show in the book, helps me to connect to not only my physical body, but also the subtler energies of my body, like my emotions and my thoughts, and it gives me time and space to be with that and check in with my own energy. That's the thing. And I think applies to everyone, whether you are dealing with addiction or not. There's so much happening in the world. There's so much happening in life. There's so many things that pull our time and our attention and our energy. It's important to call back your energy and connect to yourself and investigate how you're feeling in the moment, what's important to you, what your needs are, and to consider, what are you going to do to have those needs met and to meet those needs that you have. So I think all of that is part of soul care and self-care.
It's something we run away from a lot, isn't it? I mean, it's not just addicts, people who are workaholics. Well, that's an addiction as well, I suppose. We don't want to face ourselves. We don't want to look inside. We don't want to see what's there. So that is a real big one for people.
Absolutely. I mean, I think about how this modern age, how we all are walking around with smartphones. And so we're constantly connected to some sort of machine that can reach across the globe in an instant, and that's constantly pulling for our attention and our energy. And then you add social media on top of it. That is such a way to distract yourself. And I love all the studies that have been done about how social media and our smartphones affect us on a physiological level, and how it affects the brain, and how it's important to have a certain level of balance with it, because it can take over, and it can also you can treat it like you would a drink. You can treat it like you would a cigarette or a drug or whatever it is.
It is a more insidious, addiction, isn't it? I watch the young people around me, and I think they never have any time for reflection, for inner reflection, because this thing is always,
Yes.
every 2 seconds, and it's interrupting anything else that they're doing all the time. It's,
Yes.
yeah. Tell me about breath prayers. And you say that they can help us build faith and trust. How so?
Oh, I love breath prayers. Breath prayers, and for people who don't know what breath prayers are, it's just this practice of combining the physiological act of breathing with intention. And it simply can be done in a way that you think about something that you want to cultivate in your life, and you can just think of one word, and as you inhale, just think about drawing more of that in. And then as you exhale, think about releasing anything that stands in the way of you receiving that. Like, oftentimes I have a breath prayer of needing more peace in my life. So I'll inhale peace, and I'll exhale fear or worry. And it's a process that allows us to slow down, get still, get quiet, connect to the breath, shift out of that fight, flight, or freeze state, and create a bit more balance by activating the parasympathetic nervous system. And it also introduces just a level of optimism about life, about the moment. And also it invites us to have faith and to trust that whatever it is that you need in this moment is available to you. And it's this process and this practice of just sitting with that in a really simple way. And I wanted to incorporate that in the book because it's helped me tremendously. And it's a simple way of prayer. And it's great for anyone, whether you believe in God or don't believe in God, or I mean that's a tricky situation in and of itself. And I talk about that in the book, but it's something that I think anyone could use and grab hold of and incorporate it into their life as part of their soul care, as part of their self-care. And it's something that only holds positive things and health and well-being benefits.
You said that you found two abiding truisms through doing this work. One, that recovery is an ongoing process, and the other is that we need structure and community. Say a bit more about those two.
Recovery is an ongoing process for sure. I like I said before, I've been in recovery for 20 years now, and it feels as though it's gone by in a blink of an eye. And it's something that I have to continue to work at and continue to feed and to nourish. It's like I think of my recovery as a garden. If you don't water your garden, if you don't provide the plants with fertilizer and sunlight and care, it will wither away and die. So absolutely, it's just something that's ongoing. And also there's a need for me in my recovery to be flexible and not be rigid, because life is fluid, life is ongoing, and things come and go, and it's important for me to be resilient. And resiliency from a Chinese medicine standpoint is having this equal amount of strength and flexibility. If we're too rigid, we break. If we're flexible, we're able to move with change and move with the ever-changing tides of life. So I feel as though recovery is an ongoing thing for sure, and it's ever evolving. And then lastly, recovery is about community. Like I said before, there's no way in the world that I would have been able to get sober and have the life of recovery that I've had if I tried to do it all by myself. And I need it then, and I still need now. I still need people to be a part of my life, to allow me to share deep personal parts of myself and my experience and my struggles, and vice versa, for me to hear what others are going through, and for us to be a support for one another. And when you share a problem, the problem is halved. But if you have no one to share it with, how do you achieve that? So community is incredibly important. And like I said before, it's beneficial to our mental health when we have a supportive community of people, no matter how or where you find it. And I love what my friend Ileana in the book shares about her experience with community and how social support was really important for her, and how just having this tribe of women that they met with every single month to just talk about what's happening in their day, in and out of recovery, how that's nourished her. And I think it's something that is just vital. And unfortunately, many of us are afraid to reach out. We're afraid to reach out because we think that, again, linking back to shame, that there's just something inherently wrong with us. And why would anybody want to spend time with me? Why would anybody love me?
Yeah.
Why would anybody listen to me? And that's just stories that we tell ourselves. And unfortunately, some people's lives, there might be some people who don't want to spend time with them, who don't have the space within themselves to be empathetic and compassionate. But not everyone is like that. And I just wanted to provide people with that truth so that they try to find that and create that for themselves.
It's interesting, isn't it, that through the pandemic, we learned so much about isolation and community. We learned how important community is when we were deprived of it, and when people banded together and started helping one another in a way that, they haven't done for a long time. And at the same time, so many people were isolated and have kind of found some weird kind of comfort in their isolation and continued that. So there's a paradox there.
Absolutely. And for me, this makes me think of the difference between isolation and solitude. There's a part of me that can easily isolate. By my nature, I'm an introvert. And I know there are a lot of people who are introverts as well. And so it's not unusual for them to be alone and be with themselves. But the difference between isolation, in my mind, and solitude is isolation is something that can be draining, can drain our energy, can deprive us from the things that nourish us. And then solitude is something that's different. Solitude can be beneficial because it gives you time to reflect. It gives you time to connect to your own energy. It gives you time to be with yourself. It gives you time to just stop and pay attention. And like you said, this time that we've all gone through has taken us on a path that we just did not see coming. And I know that many people suffered during the last few years with the isolation that the pandemic brought. But I do know that a lot of people also saw it as an opportunity for change and growth as well, and are making changes in their lives that they probably wouldn't have made had they not had that experience.
Yeah. Now, you did not write this book as a 12-step book, and one doesn't need any experience with the 12 steps to, get benefit from this book. But you say that the positive impact and the influence of the 12 steps are woven into the DNA of you, really, what you do, how you teach, how you live your life. Tell me a bit more about that, because the 12 steps program isn't something that's as prevalent in the UK as it is in America. So I know very little about it other than what people tell me. How important has it been for you?
It's been very important for me. I have gone through the 12 steps multiple times in my 20 years, and I've done it with several different sponsors, people who have been like mentors for me and have guided me through the 12 steps. And I've had the opportunity also to lead other people through that process as well, which is a beautiful experience to have. It's something that, for me, provided me with a certain amount of structure. And I know that I need structure in my life. And going through the 12 steps gave me a certain amount of structure. It gave me a blueprint for how to live life in a healthy, balanced way. First, by realizing that I had a problem, and that I was powerless to change it on my own. And it led me to seek out help from a higher power, develop a relationship with a higher power, and seek out help from that higher power. And then it also encouraged me to stop and look within and do a self-inventory look at situations in my life that have caused me great difficulty and challenges, and to look at it in a very fair and objective way and look at what's my part and what part belongs to someone else, to share that with another person, from that to pull from that and see, well, what are some character defects that I might have, certain characteristics about me that kind of create some of these issues or problems that I've been having. Because that's the thing, when you do step work, you see patterns. And without taking the time to slow down and put pen to paper and take an inventory, you don't see the patterns of behavior and some of your thoughts and beliefs. And then you go and you admit where you've been at fault, and you try to make amends to others, taking responsibility, so accountability. And then you, on a daily basis, you check in and make sure that you're still working on this balanced path and that you're not falling to the right or the left. And then lastly, just being of service, taking it out into the world and being of service and helping others to achieve the thing that you've managed to achieve, which is sobriety, which is health and well-being and balance. And that even if you have one day of sobriety or recovery, you know more, or you have more experience, and you can help someone who has less than a day, because you know how to make it through a day.
Yeah.
So that ethos is woven through the book without me trying to teach people the steps or take people through the steps, because I don't think it's necessary. I think that the steps are incredible, and maybe some people who read this book who've never experienced anything 12-step related might be curious about it and do their own research about it. But for me being the person that felt like I came into this world without the manual of how to live life, felt like I was always running around trying to figure out, oh my God, well, they look like they know what they're doing and they look fine. And why am I suffering? Why am I going crazy? The steps made me, gave me a pathway, a blueprint, like I said. That's been very useful and helpful.
Writing a book is it's a very self-reflective process, you know, especially when you're writing about yourself and your own life journey. And it's a lengthy process, and you know, people talk about it as like, you know, gestating, giving birth, etc., for very good reasons. During that process of writing this book, did you find things, you know, epiphanies, ahas, things occurring to you, things that you were suddenly realizing about your own life and yourself and the journey that you've had? You know, were there any surprises for you that the process of writing brought up?
Oh my goodness, so much. It was such a process. And at times I felt like I was a pink cloud. I felt very discouraged and felt like, I don't know if I can do this. Sometimes I would question what right did I have to teach this and share this? Who am I? I don't have a million letters behind my name that makes me an authority to talk about this. And I kept going back to the truth, which is, Stephen, you have your experience, strength, and hope.
Yeah.
And that's enough. And then that's also a good starting point. And there's so much more. And it was just a wonderful experience of chopping wood, carrying water, just doing the work, letting go of the results, trusting that I was brought to this moment for a reason. And that it was very important for me to share this, to share this with others and not just keep it to myself. Trying to think of what else. There's just so many aspects to it. I loved what my writing coach said to me when I was on that pink cloud. he at first was just a little kind of concerned for me because he thought, well, because he knows he's taken many people through this process of writing a book, and he was waiting for me to have those challenging moments and just to have those chances to talk about it and not keep it inside and get to the other side of it. And of course, when I look at my experiences and I put them down on paper, I get different insights, and I also get more compassion for myself as well, for my own experiences.
Which is really important.
It is. And that's part of that unfolding of recovery.
Yeah. Well, we're almost out of time. I've got one very quick question that I want you to answer. You provide such a wealth of tools and practices and techniques and reflections and examples in the book. If readers adopt only one practice or tool, what would you most want it to be? In a very short answer.
Wow, the first thing I think is breathing with awareness. It's something that we all do, and we do it countless times per day, but very few of us do it well. And there's so much that can be gained by paying attention to your breath and breathing deeply.
We're going to have to leave this, Stephen, I'm afraid, because we're going to get cut off otherwise. It's been an absolute delight to talk with you today. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome. Recovering You, Soul Care and Mindful Movement for Overcoming Addiction is published by New World Library. For more information about Stephen Washington's wellness content, movement and meditation courses and videos, visit his website, stephenwashingtonexperience.com. That's the end of the show for this week. We'll be back next week at the same time, and I look forward to seeing you then.